where if you think that millennials could be compartmentalized, if you think that every single millennial who's walking outside of your office, who's actually playing outside of your home right now, if they're all the same, you'll be rather surprised.
Welcome everybody to the Great Millennial Hoax. I am so excited to have you join us today with a couple of fantastic experts who can debunk some of the misinformation that's out there about generational differences and help us figure out what to do to get the most out of our younger employees, our younger team members. So with us today, we have Michael Teo, and Michael is joining us from Malaysia today. He's the founder of Thriving Talents, a millennials-focused talent development company that delivers training consultancy for Fortune 500 companies across 39 countries. Michael, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for hosting us. And hello, Karen. And hello to all of you watching this right now. It's an honor for me to be here and to share with you my experiences of working with the largest group of the workforce that arguably also forms the deciding factor in the growth of our society and our economy in the future. I am the founder of Thriving Talents, and yes, we are a bunch of passionate people devoting our time and our efforts into studying the millennials, because we believe these are going to be the leaders who will be running your companies. This will be the consumers who would have the largest disposable income to spend on your products and services. And more often than not, this would also be the next platoon of leaders who you would elect to lead your communities and your countries in the future. So I thought that it's just amazing that we're gathered here right now. And it's, again, an honor to be with both of you, David and Karen, renowned authors, and just to dispel the millennial hoax. What are people getting wrong about the millennials, and even experts themselves? Now, I've had the great opportunities to do business, as you mentioned, David, across 39 countries, and we work with Fortune 500 companies to actually help them to develop the leadership potential, sales skills, capabilities, customer service skills, basically skills that their millennials will need in order to be more productive and profitable. So I'm very excited to be here.
And your enthusiasm comes through, absolutely. Well, we're excited to be here with you, and let's turn to the other half of our panel today. Karen Hurt. Karen's a former executive with Verizon, a top leadership consultant. She's the CEO of Let's Grow Leaders, has been named one of Inc. 100's top leadership speakers, is a fantastic friend of mine, as well as my co-author on our book, Winning Well, A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. So Karen, excited to be able to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Really looking forward to it.
So before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about what brought us here and why we're having this discussion, some context. We actually met via social media, which I think speaks to the power of that technology. Karen and I met through blogging. Michael, you met Karen and I via LinkedIn when you were reaching out, promoting your book that we're going to talk about a little bit in a little while, The Potential Matrix. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the use of that technology and the potential it has for relationships?
I mean, I reached out to David and Karen, as mentioned, through LinkedIn, and it was quite simple, actually. I just typed in top leadership gurus in the world, and your names popped up. So well done. LinkedIn really loves you. The algorithm behind LinkedIn really recognizes you for the good work that you have done. And what happened was, I find that by using social media platforms, oftentimes people have this misconception that it's just a waste of time, that you're just throwing time away because you're just speaking to strangers. But I beg to differ. It depends on the way on how you use the social media platforms. Like I used LinkedIn to reach out to David and Karen, and we initiated conversations, we shared some articles and documents, and what I find is that we're very excited to support each other's work. And I mean, it's really great to see what David and Karen has plans to come over to Southeast Asia, where I'm based, right here in Malaysia. And also I have plans to go back to the United States to spread the love, if I would say, to inspire people there. So again, you know, a lot of millennials, we are glued to our cell phones, we are glued to our smart devices because social media is part of our lives. But unfortunately, it has been a stereotype that people tend to assume that whenever a person, especially a millennial, is using a social media, it means that we're playing around. It means that we're playing Candy Crush, or now we're on Pokemon Go. But that's not really the case. Like how I've connected with both David and Karen. Back to you guys.
You know, what's really exciting for me when I think about this is when you talk about the really important work about growing millennial leaders and leveraging the millennial talent within your organization. It would be very easy, and there are a lot of folks doing this who say, okay, well, we need to think about how we do this with them, right? And it's a separate conversation. And what I really like about the work that we've been able to do collaboratively is to say, okay, so, you know, David and I are in our 40s. Michael is a millennial. So let's have the conversation together and explore it together. And what are the challenges, and share different perspectives. And then from there, put together some meaningful tools and techniques that we can share with the world. So not only are we partnering and collaborating across generations, we're also collaborating around the world. And I think that is really, really powerful.
Absolutely. And Michael, we are so looking forward to joining you and so many other business leaders and companies and associations when we're visiting your part of the world on the Winning Well book tour in April and May 2017. So we'll look forward to seeing you there in person.
We look forward to welcome you both.
It'll be a good time. So let's dive into our content today. What is the Great Millennial Hoax? When we talk about some of the misinformation that's out there that people might be relying on, but it leads us astray, and we're not necessarily getting the most from our younger employees, our younger team members. And so, Michael, I'm going to toss that one to you first. What is this Great Millennial Hoax?
So what happened is that you find that there are a lot of workshops, there are a lot of seminars that are being done. And one of the things that experts have actually did is that they categorize millennials based on different categories, in a sense where whenever they conduct a workshop on helping company leaders to understand millennials, they would often compartmentalize millennials into, I would say, for lack of better words, quote unquote, stereotype them into different categories. Now, that is not totally wrong, but again, this is our conversation today. We are here to debunk that millennial hoax, where if you think that millennials could be compartmentalized, if you think that every single millennial who's walking outside of your office, who's actually playing outside of your home right now, if they're all the same, you'll be rather surprised. They're not. At the end of the day, we want to be treated as human beings. You know, we're all unique. So I think one of the biggest hoax I want to dispel today is, of course, let's stop compartmentalizing millennials. And I think, David, you know, I'd like to pass this stage right now to Karen for her to share her thoughts on this topic, and then I'll elaborate more coming up next.
So for me, leadership is all about creating genuine connection with the human beings that you're working with. And I always say you can only build a team one person at a time. And, you know, it's really understanding the motivations, the values, the aspirations of each person that you're working with. And to try to oversimplify that and say, all these millennials want is this, is really a mistake. So I know we have a number of things that we want to talk about, this very specific stereotypes around millennials, David, so maybe it would be good to go through some of those and each offer some of our perspective on there.
Absolutely. So before we dive into those specifics and some of the questions, and we had some emails come in and so forth from listeners and viewers today, Michael, you've talked about the millennial term being a marketing term. Can you just comment briefly on what people are trying to do by categorizing that way?
Now, what happened is that because the Generation X grew up in a time which economy was more challenging, though we were facing rapid growth, there were a lot of innovation, there were a lot of new breakthroughs in the way how we lead our lives. The last thing in their mind is they want Generation Y, their kids, to work as hard as them. So one thing is that you will find is that Generation X parents tend to provide a lot of benefits to Generation Y kids because they do not want them to go through the hardship which they have gone through. Now, how has marketeers capitalized on this? For example, you would imagine that people would label Generation Ys as being technologically savvy. They love very sexily designed cars. So one of the examples I like to give is that if you compare an advertisement between a BMW and a Mercedes-Benz. Now, for all of you watching this right now, I'd like to challenge you to do this. I want you right now to imagine the most prominent BMW advertisement that you have seen in your life. If you could just imagine it quickly. Now, you'd imagine a BMW car, and what happened is that more often than not, you would find that the driver or the model who's posing as the driver in that car are often people who are in their youths or people who are in their not so old age. I would say they are the older Gen Ys, or they could be the real Gen Ys. So what happens is that you find that BMW tend to use younger models. Now, if you look at Mercedes-Benz, one of the jokes that people really make in the industry right here in Malaysia is that if you want to be a star in a Mercedes-Benz advertisement, and I need to give this credit to you, David, they need to look just like you. They need to have like white sideburns,
talking about?
No, it's all good, because Mercedes-Benz is capitalizing on, this wiser generation where you have made your money, you have made your fame, you have made your wealth, and there you go. You're now driving a Mercedes-Benz. You are a symbol of success. However, for BMWs, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to get young people to envision that I don't want to be driving a car that my uncle or my dad's driving. I want to be driving a car which is my symbol of success. So what happened is that BMW has positioned themselves that way, in my opinion. So it's just very magical to see how advertisers and marketeers have compartmentalized us throughout the ages to try to influence us subconsciously without us knowing, to believe that we are living in a herd mentality. When there are a lot of young people using a certain product, we should use that product because they are meant for the young people. So okay. I think that's one of the hoax that we want to dispel today.
So that makes sense, the way that marketers label groups to segment and to advertise, but we've got to be careful about adopting those in the workplace and how we're not individualizing how we lead and treat people. So let's start getting into some of those specifics. One of the questions that came in, and I've heard from a number of managers, and I'm sure Karen you have, and Michael you have as well, is that our younger teammates have to have their hands held. In fact, I was talking with a manager just yesterday in an engineering company that was sharing that his younger employees, they want so much more training, and he was frustrated because he said, look, nobody trained me. I just had to figure it out. So let's start with that as a generalization. Karen, I'm going to go to you first. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I have definitely heard that, especially in some of the call centers, the contact centers that I work in. And I think it really depends on the industry, because one of my major clients is a startup. It's a small startup, very successful, high-tech company. And I'm having the exact opposite experience. They're coming in and say, I'm there to do leadership training, and they haven't been trained in the past in how to be an effective leader. And yet they're all skeptical, like, I'm not sure we really need this. So I'm having to work extremely hard to make this incredibly engaging, very challenging, very interactive, which I always do anyway, but to make sure that they're seeing the value and that it's a good use of their time to be spending this kind of time being trained because they believe they get it intuitively. So I'm seeing almost the exact opposite in some of the companies that I'm working with.
So I wonder if that depends on the topic then. In some areas where younger folks might feel like, hey, I've got this, I don't need help, I don't need training. And in other areas where they're maybe more accustomed to really having their hand held. Michael, how about you? What do you think?
I agree with Karen, where of course it depends on the industry. For example, if you're in the financial sector, if you're in the banking industry or the investment banking industry or stock trading, you would be required to actually attend technical training. So I agree with you, Karen. It depends on the industry. However, I would also like to share another point of view. It also depends on the mental conditioning or the culture that the millennials are exposed to in a geographical region or in a country or in an industry, for example. So let me share this with you. If you could imagine 10 to 20 years ago when you were applying for your first job and you would be flipping through the newspaper advertisement and you would see an ad of an office showing that they have cubicles, they provide great remunerations, there is a planned progression for your career growth, and your life is secured. Now, oftentimes, these are advertisements that people are exposed to 10 to 20 to 30 years ago. These are advertisements which my parents are exposed to. And that has formed, that has hardwired their expectation of what a workplace should be like. However, when we hit the turn of the new millennium, we were introduced to some of these guys whom all of us would know, or some of us would know. Their names go by Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Apple, Zappos. So what happened is that when these companies came into being, their CEOs branded themselves really well by introducing corporate culture. Now what happened is that then you would find all the articles, the news, the stories, the headlines about these companies making it big to your social media sites, which again is frequent by millennials. So what happened is that subconsciously every morning when the millennial wakes up, and Facebook has this wonderful algorithm where they actually showcase the most popular stories. So when millennials are browsing through Facebook, they'll be able to read up stories about how cool is it to work in Google, how empowering is the culture at Zappos. Now what happens is that in the mind of millennials, subconsciously, without them knowing, they have been preconditioned mentally. They've been preconditioned to expect that when I go into an office, there should be colorful bin bags waiting for me. When I go into an office, my superior should be not my boss, he should be my leader, he should inspire me. So what happened is that when the millennials have all these preconceived conditioning, they would expect differently when they go into the workplace, because they would be expecting a mentor for a leader. They'll be expecting a very colorful scenario around. Again, you know, that all those elements itself would also influence whether a millennial would want training or not, because sometimes a millennial may not know whether that training is good for them or not, but because they want to be in the trend, they want to be among the cool companies, so they would demand for training. But again, you know, I'm an advocate for training. I always share this, and I want to talk about this to you, David and Karen, and to all of you watching right now. We understand that training is hard work and training can be expensive. But what happens if you don't train your people and they stay with you? That's a question to ponder upon. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's go to another question that frequently comes up, which is that millennials are often accused or generalized as, I've been here 3 days, can I lead a team now? And so a frequent complaint or question that I'll hear from managers, and we did get some questions along these lines in the email, is that millennials don't understand they have to pay their dues. They want responsibility right away. How would you respond to that as a generalization, and how can leaders maybe leverage that to help draw the most out of their younger talent? And Michael, how about you first on this one?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have 3 points to share just quickly about this. Number one, let's go back to the root of the, I wouldn't say it's a problem, I would say the root of the inspiration. Why are young people, why are millennials so in a hurry? They want to fast track their success, right? We have to go back to the root of who have inspired them. Now, if you go back to the last few decades, you know, pre-World War II, the role models that have inspired us are mostly Winston Churchill, right? For example, okay, the Prime Minister of the UK who led the UK into World War II and the Alliance won. Now, what happened is that it was very powerful to see where that was the role model of success during that time. And if you revisit any picture, if you Google it or if you Bing it right now, Winston Churchill, you'll see him dressed up in a nice tie, in a nice suit. He's very proper. He's a statesman. Pretty awesome stuff. However, at the turn of the millennium, again, 2000 coming in, to year 2000 came in and presented the millennials with a new role model. Who is that role model? They presented us with Mark Zuckerberg, where it's okay for you to be wearing a round neck and running a billion-dollar company, becoming the youngest billionaire. They presented us with Steve Jobs, with Bill Gates, who actually started their business at a very young age. The millennials of today read about Winston Churchill in history books. However, the millennials of today could watch videos, interviews, hear live speeches from people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg anywhere. So what happened is that without them knowing, the root of the inspiration has inspired them to think, I may be young, but I want to be successful. Now, that's the first point I want to share with you, okay? The second point is you asked about how can senior managers leverage on this. Well, then again, young people now We are all very fast. We get inspired. We want to fast track our achievement. I would imagine that the problem arises here when managers feel threatened, when managers feel that my position is now in danger because I have this young upstart who's like building momentum towards me. But what I would like to suggest here, instead of looking at them as a competitor, look at them as a collaborator, in the sense that you know that these millennials would go all out to work with you and to make that project a success. Work with them to actually give them more empowerment so that they serve you better, and that would help you liberate your time even more. So I think instead of looking at them as competitors, just look at them more as collaborators. That's the one thing I'll share. And the third point that I'll share with you all right now is that, sure, the millennials want to fast track their success, which is why I believe when workshops or seminars are being done to actually educate the senior generation to understand the younger generation, I believe that's not enough. In fact, I disagree with that. I believe that's like imagining clapping with one hand. There is no sound. I believe a workshop must also be done to get the younger generation, the millennials, to understand the senior generation. Now, why do I say that? Because they have to understand that despite them fast-tracking their career progress, the ones signing their checks are all still the senior generation. And oftentimes, they would be able to learn much more if they look at their senior leaders not as a competitor, but again, as a mentor, as a collaborator. All the millennials have to do is to ask questions and be open and be willing to be coached. And of course, this takes two hands to clap. The managers need to be willing to teach, and the millennials need to be ready to learn and to share and work collaboratively.
Yeah, I would add, that's all excellent. And what I would add is that one of the things that I think we need to be thinking about is the evolution of organizational structure. Because a part of what we're challenged with is this expectation that we're going to continue to have a hierarchy that you need to progress through, and that takes tenure. But really, if you look at the most innovative organizations, they are flattening. And with that, they're finding ways to create collaboration and pulling in the best talent and the best insights, regardless of title. And so if you can build your organization like that in a really innovative way, and you are developing it and helping people to leverage their biggest strengths, then it's a totally different dialogue about whether I'm progressing in the organization. And I think that's frustrating to some folks of my generation, right, where we say, well, wait a minute, we had to pay our dues and put in the time, and this isn't fair. Well, we got to, if your goal is a strong sense of mission for your company and the purpose for what you're about, then you need to have the humility to say, this is not about me. This is about the greater good. This is about the mission. And so what is the best organizational structure to make that happen? And what are the right roles within the company to make it happen? And to get people of all generations putting aside their ego to accomplish what they're there to do in the world.
That's right.
Powerful. I appreciate the notion that just because it was what was done to you doesn't make it healthy or productive or good. There could be a better way. And let's be open to those and not treat our own experience as the way things ought to be. Right?
That's right.
Speaking of, Michael, you're talking about the dialogue between generations. And recently, Karen and I were working with a group, and we had this, and I've heard this a number of places. In fact, I've recently coached some millennials who had gotten in trouble because they were very forthright, very honest with their supervisors about what they were thinking, what they were feeling, what they were observing. They were a little too forward, as it turned out, and they ended up getting in quite a bit of trouble. And I know Karen's worked with a group where it feels like everybody in that younger generation feels like they can say anything to anybody, to their CEO, and there's a lack of decorum that maybe, or perceived respect that you might have encountered in earlier generations.
Right.
Karen, let's start with you here on that one. What would you say about that? How would you address it? How can leaders help their younger employees develop in a way that's going to be productive and helpful and fruitful for them?
It's interesting. I think this is it's not just a millennial issue. When I think about one of the biggest lessons I learned very, very early in my career was I was acting just like that. I was in this very big conference, and I was the youngest person in the room, and I had been invited there because of my expertise. And so I had a lot of confidence that I had a lot to add. And one of the C-level executives was there as the introductory speaker. He didn't really ask for questions. And I raised my hand and completely challenged the main premise of what he was about. Now, it was inappropriate. And I was, it was significant. I was given a lot of feedback, and I'm lucky it didn't derail my career. So I think there is a time and a place. Should I have challenged it? Absolutely. What I had to say, I still to this day believe was correct, and I believe he had outdated thinking. But it should have been done offline. It should have been done through a chain of command. It just should have been done in a different way. And so that's my advice. It doesn't mean that what you have to say isn't appropriate. And I am all about, one of the main things I teach is diaper genie feedback. Don't take feedback and make it so benign by taking the poop and put it in the plastic. It's wrapped so bad that when you give it to a senior executive, they can't even recognize it. I'm all about candid feedback, but you do not want to disrespect anybody or embarrass them in front of their team. And so I would always think, well, if I were the person on the stage, how would I want people to address me, and how would to treat people with the same level of respect that you would if they were going to challenge you?
I agree.
Michael, is that something you've encountered?
Well, yes, definitely. I think one of the big words that I like to share would be the word called tactfulness. We need to be tactful, and I echo what Karen has just mentioned, especially coming from where I am at right now in parts of Asia, where the cultural differences or the age gap is actually a huge major issue, where pretty much if you're working in a company, and in parts of Malaysia right here, your senior managers would often have been conferred with honorary titles. These are titles that have been given to them in recognition of their contribution to the company and the country. And the last thing you want to do is to disrespect them. So I think a lot of things that my client, and these are Fortune 500 companies based here in Malaysia itself, they've always shared with me that, Michael, leadership training is important, sales is important, but can you do me a favor? Can you just coach my millennials to be more polite and to be more tactful? And I think at the end of the day, being tactful is not limited towards millennials communicating with the senior, wiser generation. I'll give you all that respect, the wiser generation. I think being tactful should be applied to everyone, because at the end of the day, again, we're all living in this world where we think that Gen Ys, Gen Zs, the millennials behave in a certain way because we have been subconsciously categorized or compartmentalized by advertising messages. But if you go back to the very foundation, millennials, non-millennials, we're all human beings after all. So it's about being tactful. And I think one of the other things I want to share right here is, of course, a model that my team and I have developed, which we have actually run simulations with a lot of companies to help them bridge that generational divide, so to speak. And that model is called the RACE model, R-A-C-E. Now, for the RACE model, R stands for respect. Now, we believe that if you, as a millennial, you want to fast track, you want to accelerate your career growth, you need the blessings of the wiser senior generation, because they're the ones who are signing your paycheck. They're the ones who would decide whether you're going to take over their spot or not. But I think before you could even fast track or accelerate your growth in your career, you need to first ask yourself, have you given that person respect? Have you shown that person respect? Now, I'd like to share with you just one example from this model. And if we have time, we'll go throughout this whole model again. For respect, I've personally encountered this before. In the year 2012, I was made one of the youngest board members of one of the most influential government ministry in Malaysia, which is the Ministry of Higher Education, through their Student Volunteers Foundation. Now, on the first day when I went to that meeting, I was the youngest junior person there. And I mean, all these other persons could be my grandfathers, to be honest with you. They could be my granddads, okay? And they're all great people. They're all great leaders. But when I went there, of course, the stereotype in a Asian culture boardroom setting is that they believe that every board member, you would have clocked in decades of experience, you would have white gray hair, you would have gray mustache. That's what they want you to look like. But I didn't look like that. So what happened was when I walked into the office for the first day, they actually thought I was the coffee boy. But you know, I was polite. You know, the two leaders who were there, they arrived early just like me. And then what happened, I just served them tea. I just served them coffee, you know, because they thought I was the coffee boy. But what happened was then my chairman walked in. Now my chairman is strong. We call her the Iron Lady, a former CEO of an investment bank in Malaysia. She walks into the room and with her British accent, she actually said, all right, everybody, settle down. We have a lot to catch up today. This is our first meeting. Oh, by the way, everyone, that is Michael Teo, our youngest board member, put forth by our Minister of Higher Education himself. Please give him a round of applause. The two senior leaders who arrived at the same time with me looked around and saluted me. You know, that's the universal sign of, I'm sorry, I got you wrong, and wow, we are now on par. But what happened was I became a loyal fan and a learner with my chairman now because my chairman showed me respect. But if you think about it, when I first walked into that meeting room, I showed the crowd respect first. And my chairman saw it and she was touched. I mean, can you imagine me walking in as an egotistical millennial and say, you know, all of you old people don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
You know, this is the
in winning well, our model, we always talk about confident humility, the power of confident humility. And that what I saw there in your story was that you had enough confidence to know that it was all going to work out, right? I know I belong a seat at the table. I don't have to be loud about it. And the humility to say, you know, I'm going to show up and watch for this to emerge. And therefore you could have the tact that you teach others. I love it.
And so what I hear you both saying is one of the challenges that we're all faced with, regardless of generation, is we all have truth to communicate, but it's not necessarily what we're communicating, it's how we're communicating it. And that we always need to pay attention to if we want to be effective with other people.
That's right.
So let's take this to another. This was the most frequent of all of the comments we got, all the questions and so forth. Here's the number one. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Millennials don't care. They don't have a good work ethic. And some examples, that they only will work their given hours, and they're 8 to 5, 9 to 5, and then they leave. And you know, in my generation, we gave it extra effort. We worked overtime. Or others that say they're lazy or just not passionate. And Michael, I'm going to start with you on this one because I think if you're watching this, you've already figured out Michael he does not fit that stereotype. So right there, you've got at least one example who's not. But it's 9:30 p.m., 10 p.m. Your time locally, and here you are in a webinar. And I think it'd be important for everybody watching to know that he's also giving up watching his nation's only medal competition in the Olympics. So, Michael, we appreciate that. But talk to us about this whole idea that millennials don't care, that they're lazy, that they lack the work ethic.
I believe that's one of the most fatal stereotypes that people could have, because immediately if a millennial applies for a job to work in your company and you have this perception that, oh God, he's going to clock out early. Oh my goodness, he's going to ask me for that free Starbucks voucher. Without coffee, he wouldn't be able to work. Oh my goodness, he's going to leave early for lunch. Oh goodness, he's going to be glued to his phone. I mean, if you're going to have that perception, even before you hire a millennial, I would say that don't hire them. Hire the Gen X, hire the baby boomers, because that is already the first wrong step forward. Now, one of the things I'd like to share is that if you find that millennials are not working extra time, they're not giving 100%. Now, I understand that there are cases where the millennials, we ourselves, we are to be blamed because it cannot be helped. Every human being, we have our attitude, we have our work ethics. It's formed when we were really young. However, I think right now, instead of pointing fingers at the millennials who are working with you, how about we reflect on what we're doing? So one of the things that I found out after working with all these major companies, Fortune 500s, I still find something very startling right here in Asia. That is, a lot of the best millennials, you would be rather surprised. They're not working for your Fortune 500s. No, they're not working for your top accounting firms. They're not working for your big fours. They're not working for your top consulting firms. They are working in startups who pay them 50% less of what they could get in the marketplace. And oftentimes when I interview them, I mean, are you crazy? You're starting your career right here and you're working in a startup. What's going through your mind? And one thing that all of them have in common, and they share with me, saying that this startup's purpose excites me. Purpose. They could see how their involvement in this startup could create a ripple effect. It could create something bigger. Number two, they've also shared this common message with me where they said the leader, the startup founder or co-founders, they could relate to them. They have appeared to be more like a mentor figure, like a coach to them. So I thought that this was really powerful in a sense when millennials, if you want them to work, if you want them to go all out for you, the first thing you got to share or you got to reflect on is how can they relate to your purpose? And you know, we're talking about the model that I talked about, the RACE, the RACE model. We talked about R for respect, which we have covered in a few moments ago. We've talked about A, which is now adaptability. In a sense, how adaptable are your company to actually adapt to the demands and to the expectation of the millennials? Knowing that right now, I think based on the research, and we had this chat with David and Karen before we went on live, was that I think there was a statistic research that shows that Gen Ys want a lot of growth. Again, by knowing that, now the challenge is back to the companies. If you know that based on all these global statistics that millennials, Gen Ys, Gen Zs, they want growth, how would you adapt your company's culture to encourage growth? How do you empower them to take on little projects and over time incrementally increase their range of responsibility? And then we talked about responsibility, RACE. C stands for communication, right? Communication here means how do you communicate that purpose to your millennials? Are you exciting them enough to believe in the route that you have paved for them to follow? And last but not least, RACE, E stands for the experience. What is the experience that you are promising to your millennials that they will get upon going all out for you? So I believe, you know, companies could actually adopt this model and also learn from it, where if you want to get the millennials to work hard for you, excite them with a purpose, invest in their growth, and show them the experience that they will get. Show them the dent that they will make in the universe, like how Steve Jobs said it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. You know, if you've got a whole group of people, whether they're millennials or another generation, and they are not engaged, the first place I would look is in the mirror. Right? Because if you've got one employee that's disconnected and disengaged, go for it and try. And there's all kinds of tools and techniques that we can help you with that work with that. But if everybody's that way, it's not a generational problem. It's that your mission is not clear. It's that you're not engaging and inspiring them to feel like they're connected to something bigger than themselves. It's that it doesn't feel fun to come to work. It feels exhausting. It's, you know, perhaps the environment, they're sick of being told what to do and without, not being given the authority to impact the things they need to impact. And so that's what I would really say is make sure that you've got a good system in place to understand what your employees are thinking. Often when David and I go into companies and we do focus groups and interviews and we collect all this data and we'll present it back to the leader and they'll say, I had no idea. Well, you know, if you ask your employees, they will, in a safe way, they will tell you. So that's the first thing I would do. Make sure that you have an opportunity to have open dialogue within your organization about what matters to the people that you're asking to devote a good portion of their lives to. There you go.
And on that notion of purpose and meaning, we've heard this from managers as well in a frustrated tone, and I've heard this particularly from either cynical, disaffected X-generation leaders or boomers who say things like, they call it work for a reason. I mean, these millennials, they want their work to mean something, and they throw up their hands as if that's a ridiculous request, which I always find funny. Why would you want somebody to do something that's meaningless? So right. when you're working with, and actually, Michael, you're in the situation where your entire team are all millennials, and you yourself are a millennial, so you're leading millennials as well. And Karen and I have both been in that situation, and we advise and work with managers who are in that situation. And Karen, I'm going to start with you here. How do you recommend that leaders do that process of connecting the work to the reason for it, to the meaning and purpose behind it, especially if they're not in a startup type of a situation and they've got a team of 5 or 6 people in a much bigger organization? How can they make that connection for their folks?
Yeah, so one of the things that we often hear, especially if you go into the really big companies, right, the really big ones that have been established and around for a long time, people say, and we're going in with the winning well message. Well, I want to win well, but the culture is so broken. There's no way we can do it. And that's what we really talk about, creating a cultural oasis, right? That you have the power from wherever you are in the organization to really create a healthy culture. Now, that's going to involve perhaps buffering some of the nonsense that's going on, but it really is possible. And I would say it absolutely starts with, what is the vision at a team level or a department level, whatever your sphere of influence is, to say, what are we really about? What is it that our customers want? How are we adding value to the world? And if it's just to make a paycheck, that's not going to inspire folks. So you need to keep digging, right? And really say, what is it that we're really about, right? So I came from telecom industry. I spent 20 years at Verizon. When I would go in and do visioning work with my team, and I did it in a variety of contexts. Sometimes it was call centers, sometimes it was large sales teams, sometimes it was outsourcers. But the bottom line is, a customer's phone, right? If you leave home without your wallet, you may say, well, I could probably borrow $5 and get some lunch, right? And I'll make it through the day. But if you leave home without your phone, chances are you're turning around and coming back and getting your phone. And so that is how important it is, for people. That's the purpose, that you are supporting and empowering the major communication channel that people depend on all day long. And so then I would start with, okay, so that if you're in a call center, what does that mean? Well, when somebody is frustrated and they're calling in, it's not just that their phone is broken, it's that their mother is in the hospital and they can't reach them. Or it's that they're worried about their child who's coming in home after school and does not have a way with a key and getting in, and they don't have a way to connect. You've got to understand at a deeper level of why the work that you're doing is so important. And so I would encourage, no matter what your business is, to help people connect to that deeper purpose, and then understand how it is that their specific roles, the behaviors that they show up with every single day at work, make an impact on that bigger purpose.
Thank you, Karen. And Michael, what are some strategies that you've seen that have been effective? You work with some big clients. When you say Fortune 500, I mean, you've got some big names among your clients that you're helping their managers to work with their younger employees. What are some strategies that you have found to help those bigger employees connect meaning and purpose with the work?
Thank you. Well, I've had the great opportunities to work with some of the most exciting companies. I mean, they inspired me and they're my clients today. People like Microsoft, Sony, General Electric, Allianz. So they've all been my clients. And what has been interesting is that I would summarize the response to your question into 3 main points. Now, the first point is this. If you are going to sell a millennial, if you're going to sell to a youth to consider applying to work in your company based on the paycheck you're giving them, you are just letting them compare you to your competitor. And I'll give you an example. We have had the great opportunities to work with the Big Four consulting accounting firm, to be more precise, accounting firms in the world, right? And I don't want to mention names right here because they're all competitors, right? Now, what happened is that in a career fair, they were all reaching out to millennials. You would imagine that there is a recruitment drive and you have all 4 of the Big Four accounting firms in the world right there. What happened is that this millennial would go to the first booth and he would ask, how much would I get paid? And they would say, your starting pay would be $3,000 a month. And the candidate would say, thank you very much. He would go over to the next booth and say, hi there, your competitor just offered me $3,000. How much will you offer me? And they would say, well, we'll offer you $3,050. Great, thank you very much. They go on to the next company and say, hey, your 2 competitors just offered me $3,050. What are you going to offer me? $3,300. Great, you get the job. All right, fantastic. So what happened is that if you just tell the millennials about the price that you're willing to pay for their services, well, they're going to treat you that way because they're going to see you more as someone who issued their paycheck. Compared to some of our clients who are actually in the startup realm, what happened is that, of course, they couldn't pay that much, but they excite the millennials about the purpose and about the vision, the 3 years plan, the 5 years plan, the 10 years plan. They excite the millennials to work with them because they could show the roadmap of their growth when they start working with them. And guess what? Since global statistics have shown that millennials want growth, more often than not, they would then start comparing that work experience of having that growth opportunity, working in that startup, rather than comparing in a paycheck warfare among the big four accounting firms, as I've just mentioned. So this is a real story that we're seeing. So if you want to excite the millennials to join you, share with them the roadmap of their growth. Don't just tell them how much paycheck they'll be making, because if you do that, they'll only compare paychecks to paychecks in your company's case. Now, the second point I'd like to share here is a notion, I would say, reverse mentoring. Now, we have seen this being done in General Electric, one of our clients as well. Amazing initiative where, General Electric, I believe, is one of the longest Fortune 100 company still in the top 20 list, I believe. Now, what happened is that in General Electric, what we have seen is that they would encourage their directors to do reverse mentoring with university students. That's amazing. So during one of our programs that we're doing a workshop and a team building with them, they would actually get university students to come in, and they would then sit all their directors down, and instead of their directors sharing with these students about what is life working in General Electric, you have students sharing with their directors what do they expect out of a leader. What do they expect in terms of workplace benefits and remunerations? What do they, or how do they define growth? And I thought that that was very powerful because it was so enlightening for the directors to go back with fresh new ideas to implement, and ideas that we know the millennials would want. Now, last but not least, the third point, as I want to conclude right here, the third point I would share, if you want to bridge the generational gap in your workplace, I think the most important thing is to communicate. Now, oftentimes I understand companies would say, my vision and mission are stated in the employee's handbook. My employee's screensaver would have it flashed in front of their eyes every day. Guess what? That's not enough. Nothing beats the human touch. If you believe that once you've employed someone that they'll remember your vision and mission for life, well, mostly they would memorize it, but they will not internalize it. And the only way they would internalize it is what I would say, leadership by example. If, as a senior leader, if you want to work with the millennials better, well, give yourself a break. Try to understand the millennials. Sometimes go up to them and organize a movie night or organize a getaway and ask the millennials to design that getaway for you. Ask your younger team to design that working space with you. So what happened is that they would then be able to see that you're open to ideas and that you're ready to evolve with the times and the trends. So those would be the 3 points I want to share.
Yeah, where I see the excellent points. Where I see this showing up a lot in the strategy work that I do with companies is around social media. And so it's often very interesting to me. I'll come in and we'll be doing a bunch of strategic work, and then they'll say, well, we really just got to get better at social media. And it'll be a number of 40 and 50-year-old white men sitting around the table telling me they need social media, and they look at me, and I do have a big social media following, so they're wanting my advice. But I say, I can give you my perspective, but who have you asked on your team? Right? They have all these millennials that are working with them. I mean, we've got to get the right people who understand your industry in the room, and this is a perfect way for you to get them involved in the strategic work because they're out there doing it and they're understanding what your up-and-coming customers need. An example of this, and this is a kind of a one-off, but I'm doing some work with a group of bowling centers. And all the bowling center managers have all been managers for 35 to 40 years. And when I asked them, what is one of their biggest challenges and how are they doing, one of them is a Pokestop. This bowling center is a Pokestop. Well, how are you leveraging that? And they're like, I don't know anything about it. Well, you've got everybody working in your bowling center is between high school and college age. These people are your social media experts. Get them to design your Pokestop strategy. Right? So I think that sometimes it's very easy to say, oh no, we're the strategists and they're the implementers. But in some of this work, you're not in the best position to be the strategist, and you've got to tap into the hearts and minds of the people, and that will excite them, and that will engage them.
Exactly.
And from boys, can't emphasize that enough. And from a employee development standpoint, going back to the survey that you cited, Michael, that discovered that one of the things millennials most want out of their work is a sense of growth, which, by the way, is not unique to millennials. There are 41% of boomers say that that's a top desire in their work as well. But that sense of development and growth, if you can incorporate people and get them thinking strategically, saying it's good that you know about the Pokemon Go game. Now let's think about, what does it mean? What does it look like for that strategically? What business objectives does it serve? And if you can take somebody who's in their 20s and get them thinking about the outcomes, it's not just that it's a fun thing to do, but what can you do with that fun thing that's going to serve this business purpose? And now you have a young person thinking strategically with their relevant data set and their skill set that maybe you don't have, and you can create an incredibly powerful team that can be a competitive advantage in your industry, where a lot of people are not getting their 20-somethings thinking strategically and thinking in terms of business outcomes. So Karen and Michael, I think those are great points as you bring those together that help turn all of this and get the growth going and get the meaning and purpose connected, and are developing your business and getting your business objectives met in the process.
Yeah, when we get called in to do leadership development work, and we break down what are the objectives that you really want to impart on your team, usually one of the top 3 things that people say is, I need my team to think more strategically. These managers are not thinking strategically. And then when we dig into that, it's not a training issue. These folks do not have exposure to what is happening in the business and the bigger picture to be able to think strategically. They have the critical thinking, which we can tap out and hone and develop. But first, you got to not hold everything so close to the vest so that people can see what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And then you teach them the critical thinking and the step-by-step ways to analyze things to become more strategic. They've got the capability.
That's right. I would agree. Absolutely.
So we're about getting to the end of our time here. So what I'd like to do is talk about the Potential Matrix for just a moment, Michael. It is a fantastic book, and I want to encourage everybody who is here to go get a copy. And you can go to www.potentialmatrix.com. And what Michael and his team did was they have interviewed high-performing young people being 39 and younger, from all over the world. And these are amazing, amazing folks. And they pulled out all of the research, the data, and what were the commonalities that these folks had that made them so successful and such high performers. And so it's a great kind of gift to be able to give to some of those younger employees in your life that you really care about and you want to see them develop. Whatever age you are, I'm not 39, I am older than that, and I was reading it and finding, hey, some things I can take advantage of that will help me be more successful. And so what they found are very meaningful and relevant for everybody. So I'd highly encourage you to go to potentialmatrix.com and pick that up. But Michael, one of the questions that you asked there, a reflection question for somebody reading the book, I want to ask both you and Karen, and I thought it was a fantastic question for all of us, and that is, what is your number one motivation first thing in the morning when you wake up?
Well, I'm very passionate to share about this because, again, my girlfriend and my staff and my family members would often confuse me as a workaholic, in a sense where the lines between work-life balance is really blurred for me. But I think that's one of the reasons why when I wake up early in the morning, my motivation for me to do what I do every day is that passion to inspire and to educate people's lives, to make them more effective, productive, and profitable. Because I believe once everyone is productive, we're effective in the things we do, we are profitable, we are sustainable, we are then able to contribute more to society. And again, thank you, David, for sharing about our book, The Potential Matrix. Echoing back to the passion, one of the things that I wake up every morning feeling more energetic and passionate to do, inspiring people, this book project is a testament of that passion. I mean, we started this research project 4 years ago. It was in the year 2011, 2012. And during that time, I've just completed a world tour. I was going around the world, 22 countries, visiting companies, NGOs, and governments to help them to develop their millennials, to become more charismatic leaders, to be problem solvers, to be great innovators in their communities. What happened was when I got back to Malaysia, I worked as a management consultant for a while. And during that time, I started thinking, you know, these are all young people that are Guinness World Record holders. They are recognized in Time magazine. They're in Forbes top 30 under 30. They're all amazing people. They're from Harvard. They're from MIT. They're high school dropouts who are multi-millionaires right now, leading huge organizations. What if we could share their story with the world? Now, one of the things, though, when I was working as a management consultant, my mentor challenged me. He said that, Michael, are you just going to write another book that's all about motivation? Because we have a ton of that right now. So what I thought was, hey, you know what? I'm not going to write a book about motivation. I'm going to write a book about strategy. So I guess I was in the right place at the right time with the right mentor because I was a management consultant with one of the largest management consulting firms in Malaysia. So what happened was when we developed the Potential Matrix book, we ensured that we interview people from all around the world with a large population, ironically, coming from the United States, from North America, and also from China. Because we see that these are the two largest markets, economic superpowers, who's going to influence trends in the world, and they will influence how we work. So we interviewed all these people. We made sure that they have the highest credentials. Again, Guinness World Record holders, featured on CNN, their work is on Discovery Channel. They're amazing. And then what happened is that we then challenged ourselves to come up with a model, which is why it's called the Potential Matrix, where people could now replicate whatever they have done. And I want to thank you, David, for actually going through the book. And as you have mentioned, at the end of every chapter of the book, we actually have two sections. You would remember we have the reflection questions, where pretty much we would ask the readers to be honest with themselves, sometimes brutally honest, to actually reflect on where they are right now and using the strategies that have been proven by these top performing millennials from around the world, how can they get to their next stage or their next phase of growth? We would then follow up to the next section, which is a to-do list. Now, oftentimes we're inspired where people read books and they're great books, but we find that, especially if you're in Asia, right? People tend to be a little bit lazy. They would find a book inspiring, but then they don't know what to really do with it. So what happens, we included a to-do list where we basically mapped out exactly what these millennials have done so that you could replicate their success. And for those of you who are leading millennials in your team, either you're a manager, you're a leader, or you're a parent or grandparent, you can actually read this book to actually see what are some of the advice or suggestions you could offer them to develop themselves. And again, this book, it's amazing. We've had great reviews for it. And again, we're so excited to be sharing it with both David and Karen right there in the United States. And we're looking forward to it. And this is the living testament of my passion, of what wakes me up every morning, the passion to inspire and educate the world.
Well, I'll tell you, Michael, it is a phenomenal book. It's and you don't say this about every book. It is a beautiful book. I mean, it's actually a pleasure to go through and read and the design. And I can't help but to tell people that when you take a look at the Potential Matrix, you're going to be inspired. You're going to be motivated. You're going to be energized. And no matter what age, no matter what part of generation you are. So I encourage you to go to potentialmatrix.com and check that out. Karen, how about you? What gets you up in the morning? What's that number one motivation for you?
To rid the world of toxic leadership behaviors. And, you know, so often, you know, I've experienced leaders and managers who feel like they don't like the way they're showing up as a leader, but they believe that it's the only way to get results. And I'm absolutely out to convince the world that that is not true. That to gain the results that you really want, the breakthrough results, the results that will sustain over time, that will leave a legacy on the world and the people that you work with, are done by really soulful leadership, right? The showing up with confident humility, balancing results and relationships, and to really make an impact that way. And by proving it through data and to show the leaders that are doing that and are leading that way are the ones that are getting the results. And the ones that are not, it's like they turn up a burner and they can spike a result for a short period of time and maybe then they'll be moved on to the next assignment. Nobody really catches up. But if you look over time, and I'm collecting a database of this, you are now seeing that the people who are really making an impact over the world are doing it the right way. And so that is my mission, is to get into organizations to help people learn the right behaviors that can lead to those sustained results, to help talk about the things that people are afraid to talk about, to open communication up in organizations so that people are receptive to the feedback, and to really make an organizations through across a variety of industries where people feel good about coming to work every day. They feel passionate about the work that they're doing, and the world will be better if we have higher functioning organizations.
Without a doubt. And that's ultimately, right, that's the message of Winning Well, that it's not only possible to blend the bottom line with the human spirit, but you get a better sustained bottom line and better results and better world when you do. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here and being a part of the conversation. We're going to land this plane here with one final summarizing thought, and that is, so we talked about the great millennial hoax and that all of the different generalizations and some of the misinformation and so forth. What is the number one takeaway that you would like, your bottom line for today, that you'd like to communicate to everybody watching? Karen, how about you start us off there?
Millennials are human beings, just like your Gen X and just like your baby boomers. And if you can really reach in and put aside your ego and your expectations for a moment and get inside and establish a bottom line, real, genuine relationship, you are off to an amazing start.
All right. Thank you, Karen. And Michael, we're going to give you the last word here. How about your fundamental, your bottom line, your big takeaway?
Karen, I echo every word you have mentioned. All of you should actually go back, reflect on what Karen has shared. Very powerful stuff. I'm just going to build on that by saying genuine relationship transcends across generation. In fact, if you're genuine with people, the generational gap would seem obsolete, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. If you want people to show you kindness, I'm a believer, be kind to others. And if you want the millennials to work and to go all out for you, think about how you would then empower them to do so, and how you could gain their trust so that they can trust you as their leader, as their coach, as their guide, to pave the way for their next phase of growth with you. That would be my concluding remarks for our sharing today.
All right, fantastic. We're all human beings. Each of us is an individual. Let's connect with each other that way. Fundamental respect and kindness. Good words to live by, good words to work by, and certainly good words to lead by. Thank you so much for being a part of the panel, the webinar today. And for everybody listening, again, you can find Michael's book, The Potential Matrix, at www.potentialmatrix.com. You can find Winning Well on Amazon or winningwellbook.com. Keep on winning well. Be the leader you want your boss to be. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
See you, everyone. Bye.